I'm filming a short video that just explains my process for how I feed my sourdough. This is my sourdough. It just came out of the fridge this morning. It had been in there for a while because the fridge is like the pause button on the sourdough. And this is what it looks like with about 10 hours sitting on my room temperature counter. My house is a little bit warm. You can see all my labels here. I'm going to feed it with all-purpose flour, which is what I always use for my all-purpose sourdough system. And I'm going to use around 90-degree temperature Fahrenheit tap water. I like my tap water. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. And yeah, that's what my sourdough likes. It is able to thrive with that. You can use what you like best, but 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This is what the texture of my sourdough is looking like right now after sitting on the fridge or on the counter from out of the fridge for like 10 hours. This is the quality of the bubbles. I'm adding in my around 90 degrees Fahrenheit water. I'm not measuring anything because I am looking for the consistency of the actual culture, the sourdough starter itself, and not the measurements. I am feeding more than you will normally feed at a time. So, because what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take it out. I'm going to take out like a lot of it to separate into separate containers to sell. So this is not, I'm making like a lot of these. I'm going to separate it out. This is not as much as you usually feed. And now that the water is incorporated, it's like thin pancake batter consistency. I actually do want it to be a little bit thinner, so I'm gonna add a little bit more water. And you can see the bubbles of it here. It looks real active. See, I'm like looking at the actual stuff itself, and I'm not looking at the video. And that's making the video quality go down. And then I'm like over here looking at the video and I can't see the texture, so it's hard to do, and I apologize. But yeah, it's like a little bit thicker pancake batter consistency, I would say. I'm going to feed it my all-purpose flour because that's what it likes right now. That is what, if you have now bought my sourdough and you're watching this video to learn how to feed it, it wants all-purpose flour. That is what this sourdough culture likes right now. But you can, if you watch my bigger video, switch it over, feed it whole wheat sometimes. People use all kinds of different flours because this is the grain wheat, and all kinds of other grains can do this type of yeast dance situation that makes sourdough bread and all kinds of sourdough recipes. So I'm going to use both hands to incorporate this, but add in as much flour is going to give you like mashed potato consistency. Start with less and then add more. This was probably like a third of a cup of flour for too much, more than you would usually feed. So I'm gonna say this all incorporated, it's about mashed potato consistency. And then I will scrape my spatula because I just want to minimize how much flour goes down my kitchen sink drain. You want to try to avoid having flour sourdough stuff on the edges of the container because that can lead to an area where mold can grow. So usually if my container gets like really coated in stuff, I try to switch my culture into a clean container. Then I clean the container I like most for my sourdough starter. I can get my whole hand in here. It's much easier to function than, oh, like I could not function with a regular mouth jar. I would need like a wide mouth jar to do sourdough, because like, I mean, my spatula wouldn't really fit that well in that. It would not be fun. So like this works really well for me. Yeah, so it doesn't want to touch metal as much. It does work, you know, if you use like a metal kitchen spoon to feed your sourdough and stuff, but it just like does not like metal as much. It doesn't want a metal lid. It wants a BPA-free plastic lid for these type of things. This glass here, it really likes. That's the type of lid that it really prefers, especially if you can put some kind of silicone thing here to crack the lid, because it wants to have airflow. This is a living organism, a living colony of yeasts. So I think that's all for this video. I'll film an outro. I did want to highlight the labeling system that I do on my sourdough. This is going to be in my bigger video too, but I have here like the origin of what this is. It is this. This is my all-purpose starter. I like to note what its like condition is, so that I can like remember. So this had been in the fridge for several days, and then I fed it today, so I'm going to make a new label that says that it's been fed today. I typically feed my sourdough once every 24 hours, and depending on the temperature, how fast your yeast is working, that is how often you will need to feed your sourdough starter. Labeling system, I really love it. I just take my Sharpie and I'm gonna write, I fed this sourdough on today 6/6, and then take your knife and make a nice line. You can peel it off. I like to bunch up the corner so it's easier to remove when I'm doing my dishes. I fed it today. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my silicone kitchen spoon to, this is not the spoon I thought it was. Aha! Gonna remove this and put it in fresh jars for the people I'm selling it to. Hooray. So using that spoon was like the most, no, I would say like the least best way to do that. Yeah, I would not do that again. I like to pour it, but I didn't want to commit to this container needs to be switched, which I usually do after I do that. Now I'm going to scrape down the sides of this to have it all be down at the culture level. And then I'm going to clean these up with a moist, or, you know, like a wet, clean paper towel, single use, that I'm going to throw away afterwards. And get these, you know, as clean as possible, because that just looks bad. And these are 1/2 gallon size mason jars. I like this 1/2 gallon size because you can amass a little bit more sourdough starter that you're able to use in your kitchen, which means you can make multiple sourdough recipes in one day with it. Whereas if you are only feeding like enough to make one loaf of bread, you're only gonna be able to have enough to use to make one loaf of bread. But I'm wanting to make lots of sourdough recipes because sourdough bread is not nearly the only sourdough recipe out there. It is only one. There are hundreds. So now, yep, I'm gonna go clean those, and I will show you the type of lids that these like. So I like the 1/2 gallon mason jars, but they're a little bit hard to find. This 1 gallon anchor jar I like the best. So it has this nice glass lid, and then I prop it open with a silicone mason jar top, you know, like lid, so that it has an opening. It wants to have air. It wants to have access to air, but it does not want like an open lid to where it can dry out or dry out the top of it. So usually what these like is a regular mason jar lid will work on this. Don't put a band. Don't even put a band. And that's great for it. But that has like some metal components, so it can ruin your lids. And the sourdough, I think, is just more happy when it has a BPA-free plastic lid on it. But really, really happy with this glass and silicone. So I'll show you what that looks like. So here, this will show you the difference between what I did here and how they were before. When I had transferred the starter into these different containers for it, it got all messy, and I decided to clean that with my single-use clean paper towels, disposable, warm water from the tap, and I just cleaned to minimize the mess, minimize the risk for any kind of pathogen or mold spore or whatever that's in the air to like latch onto. Just when you minimize the mess, you have to clean less. You do major cleans less when you do little cleans more. Let me see. So yeah, I do try to, when the jar just starts looking a little rough, like put your stuff into a new container, clean your one that you really like, put it in a new container, clean the one that you really like, then put it right back in to the clean one that you really like, clean your one that you don't care about as much. It's like a little bit harder for you to function with. And then you're good to go. You do want to, because this is like a living organism that you're trying to keep alive long term, you do want to look out for its health in the long run. So that's when food safety is going to be much more important than if you are making something that you are about to eat for dinner and not have any leftovers, you know. Food safety is a lot more important when you are trying to keep something alive long term. So inevitably, my sourdough starter will get moldy and not be food safe anymore. And then you just have to compost it. There's not shame in that. The nutrients stay in the system. So if something looks iffy, compost it. And if it looks wonderful, keep it wonderful. You know, treat the things you love with care to make them healthy and make them stay healthy. If I'm cleaning up this mess of little sourdough starter, I can use a soapy towel that I'm gonna wash later. For cleaning things inside the jar, I want to use something disposable, and then I'm going to compost that. I don't care about the compost rules or whatever, but so yeah, I'm going to compost that after I use it for that, to keep that really clean and healthy. Yep. So this is the type of lid that it likes. It wants to just be like sat on there. BPA free plastic. Over here, glass, and I'll show the silicone lid. And this is just how I label it. This is the origin of the starter, the origin of the culture. This was when it was fed last. This is my website, so they can, I don't know, I guess find like recipes. I don't really post that much anymore. And then YouTube, this is how they're gonna find my video to figure this out if they need help. And it says sourdough. So this is what I was talking about, the little silicone mason lid. For my glass to have like a little bit of airflow into the sourdough starter. This is enough airflow for them. Yeah, so feed like once every 12 hours. And you want to keep the sourdough starter that you love away from way too hot heat that's gonna burn the living yeasts that live in this culture. They will not like that. It will not be good for the health of the sourdough starter. Use it frequently. Make bread, eat bread fast, make more bread. And then there are a lot of other recipes that you can use this for. You will have to use happy, ready, active state sourdough. So this has been fed. It was unhappy, which is the discard stage, and now it has been fed, and we have to wait for it to double in size. It's supposed to like double in size, and then you can either feed it again from that size, which will require more flour to feed at that time, or you can use some of it and then feed less of it. Yeah. My favorite recipes that I use in my sourdough kitchen are sourdough crackers. Absolutely love those. I use the Farmhouse on Boone sourdough cracker recipe. It works really well. The creator, her name is Lisa Bass, but her business goes by Farmhouse on Boone. She's sourdough queen of everything. Then I like the no knead bread recipe from Melissa K. Norris. And you can actually use like a half a cup of really happy, active, ready to use sourdough for your yeast in that recipe, I have found. For her no knead bread, it's not going to behave like sourdough bread because it's not. It's just you're using sourdough starter for a no knead bread. My cat. So, okay, I like the crackers. I like to use it in cookies. I will just like add a scoop of sourdough, usually discard, to any baking recipe that I'm using, and it makes it more, it adds yeast, so it makes the recipe rise. It adds a little bit of the sour taste, which is the sourdough. That's why they call it that. So I'll make like pumpkin bread or like muffins with the sourdough. You can make like a cheese cracker. You can make a chocolate cake, brownies, anything that like, it's like a dough-based recipe. You use this as yeast. You can use it any way that it works for you. And this is how I have found that it works for me. And it has taken me 5 or 6 years to really figure this out. And I'm not to the point where I make sourdough bread all the time, because that's really difficult in my opinion, because I just don't do that very often. I learned how to keep my sourdough starter alive and how to make my system work for several years before I was ever able to make a single loaf of sourdough bread. That's because that was not my main focus. I was like, I love sourdough chocolate chip cookies, and that's good enough for me, and it was. And now I'm starting to make sourdough bread. I cannot point you to a recipe for sourdough bread for this video. I'm very sorry. My recipe is from a trusted friend, and I purchased it from her. So, and I don't think she sells it like very publicly. So find a sourdough bread recipe that works for you and use your sourdough starter. Figure out how it works for you. It's your life. It's your sourdough. Do it safely, do it smartly, and make it work.